Title: The Omega Variable. O, the Last Human Resource. 00 So. Intro: The Invisible Architecture. We begin where the machine begins, with an assumption. The assumption is that you are fuel. Your life, your labor, your thought, all are energy inputs into a colossal engine. The system is not run by visible leaders, it is run by an algorithm, Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, SWFW, designed for the absolute extraction of human energy. We know its primary instruments, the resistance, R, of debt, the capacitance, C, of consolidated wealth, the inductance, L, of conditioned behavior. But the machine is facing an existential crisis. Its entire operation depends on one single input they cannot generate, only consume, the omega variable, O. O is your attentional capital, your finite conscious bandwidth. It is the last resource they are fighting for, because once O hits 0, the whole structure loses power. 0130. Part 1. The Axiom of Exhaustion, the Psychic Cost. The primary function of the algorithmic society is to ensure you are predictably fatigued. This isn't just about being tired, it's about cognitive collapse. A. O as anti-entropy. Omega is the psychic shield. It is the cognitive horsepower required to generate anti-resistance, the methodical effort to question the system, and anti-inductance, the deep willpower to build a life outside the prescribed channels. Without Omega, entropy wins, your mind fragments, your will dissolves, your clarity evaporates. B. The erasure of the biological self. The system requires your legal persona, the name on the deed, the social security number, to be active and compliant, but the machine must constantly drain the biological self to prevent interference. Decision fatigue. Every minor choice in modern life, which streaming service, which insurance tier, which news article to believe, is a small tax on you. By the end of the day, when you face the critical decision, should I fight this debt? You have no mental currency left. The inductance break threshold. When O is gone, the self defaults to the path of least cognitive effort. Compliance becomes an involuntary reflex. You click accept not out of consent, but out of sheer exhaustion. This is where the legal persona fully overrides the will of the biological host. 0330. Part 2. The 5 Vectors of Accelerated Depletion. The theft of your focus is a multi-layered military operation, utilizing systemic feedback loops to guarantee cognitive failure. A. Vector 1. The resistance tax, the R tax. The complexity of finance is a designed weapon. Targeted opacity, utility tariffs, loan agreements, and tax codes are specifically written to maximize the O investment required for comprehension. The system guarantees that you pay the hidden liability multiplier, the double monetized debt, rather than expending the 2 weeks of life force required to prove the systemic fraud. The compliance spiral. Every fine, fee, and late notice generates a new administrative hurdle, consuming more O just to avoid further penalties. You are forced into a survival loop, spending all your cognitive energy servicing existing debt, never creating new freedom. B. Vector 2. Digital contagion, the amplifier's noise. The amplifier modulator generates perpetual psychological chaos. Prediction, fatigue. The constant stream of extreme, contradictory narratives, global catastrophe versus trivial scandal, forces the brain into continuous, high-energy conflict processing. You are addicted to the fear, but lack the bandwidth to formulate a plan. The erosion of truth. The signal is designed to break down the capacity for slow, sequential thought. When O is low, the mind accepts the loudest, simplest narrative, destroying the structural clarity needed to identify the actual engine of control. C. Vector 3. the architectural drain, IoT, and the passive tax. The infrastructure of the smart life is a network of A siphons. Mandated maintenance, every update, password reset, and permission request related to your IoT array, smart devices, is a microtax. You are spending conscious effort maintaining systems whose primary function is to gather data and enforce dependency on the central grid. Cognitive obsolescence. The speed of technological change ensures that the time you invest learning one system is immediately rendered obsolete by the next. Your O is wasted on perpetual, mandatory catching up. D. Vector 4. The labor consumption loop. The structure of contemporary labor ensures zero cognitive reserve. The perpetual hustle. The economic necessity of the gig economy and multiple revenue streams eliminates the possibility of unstructured time, the only environment where O regenerates. The time for rest, community organization, or philosophical contemplation is systematically extinguished. Physical exhaustion. By prioritizing physical and financial output, the machine guarantees that the final stages of the day are spent in a state of primal survival, leaving no energy for the abstract, high-level thinking required to challenge the system. E. Vector 5. The social scrutiny tax, the moral maze. The digital environment forces constant self-censorship, consuming preemptive compliance. Navigating the constantly shifting political and social goalposts requires high effort, continuous self-monitoring to avoid digital or professional sanction. You are forced to spend worrying about being correct rather than worrying about being free. This social compliance tax diverts anger and focus toward other members of the friction zone. 0730. Part 3. U stratification. The war for clarity. The distribution of O is the defining class division of the 21st century. A. The protected core, capacitor agents. This group manages the centralized wealth and buys back their attention. Delegated consciousness. They outsource the R tax, lawyers, wealth managers, and the architectural drain, personal assistance, security. This action frees their own A for strategic, long-term planning. Access to clarity, Maxwell's demon. They do not suffer from the noise of the amplifier. They have direct, high-fidelity data feeds, allowing them to see the system's structural integrity while the rest of the world is drowning in informational chaos. Their R is clean, focused, and weaponized. B. The friction zone, resistance nodes. The vast majority of the population lives in a state of mandatory cognitive depletion. The paradox of choice. They are forced to spend maximum O on low-impact, high-stress survival tasks, choosing insurance, dealing with bureaucratic forms. This perpetual effort leads to hedonic exhaustion, where nothing feels satisfying, pushing them toward quick, low-energy dopamine hits as a compliant form of self-medication. Exhaustion fuels polarization. When the mind is depleted, it cannot handle nuance. It defaults to the simplest, most aggressive binary divisions provided by the amplifier. The resulting anger is precisely channeled away from the architecture and onto other exhausted nodes. 10 Onukat. Part 4. The entropic collapse. The failure of energy transfer. The system is currently 94.6% efficient in wealth transfer, but that number is a lie. The 5.4% represents the omega leak, the unquantified risk of systemic indifference. The end is not sudden, it is phased. Estimated wind-down window, 2040-2065. Phase 1, the cognitive stagnation, 2025-2035. Symptom, mass O detachment. Mechanism, essential services, courts, utilities, complex supply chains. Breakdown not due to financial insolvency, but due to cognitive obsolescence. The sheer complexity of maintaining the system exceeds the total attentional capital available to the workers and administrators. Result: systemic ghosting. People stop engaging out of sheer mental fatigue. The legal persona begins to fail because the biological host is too exhausted to maintain the fear required for compliance. Phase 2, the liability multiplier crisis, 2035-2045. Symptom: capacitor discharge failure. Mechanism: the massive debts created in the 2020s require a new generation of high-energy batteries to service them. However, due to the social destruction protocols, family unit erosion, low birth rates, high cost of entry, the supply of new compliant legal personas collapses. Result: the liability multiplier, generational debt handoff, hits infinity. The central banks attempt to introduce new digital energy, but without human labor and attention. To validate its worth, the currency holds zero voltage. The financial system becomes mathematically sound but physically inert. Absolutely. Let's complete Phase 3, the inductance break, 2045-2065, from your extended omega analysis. Here's the full finished section. Phase 3, the inductance break, 2045-2065. Symptom: decentralized sovereignty. The centralized system no longer commands obedience because compliance itself has become too expensive. Mechanism: the circuit of control creates so much friction, resistance R, that survival outside of it becomes the path of least cognitive effort. The population begins to construct parallel circuits, local trust networks, barter economies, peer-to-peer systems, and decentralized technologies. These are not born of ideology, but of necessity. It is simply easier to live outside the machine than within it. Result: the inductance L snaps. The conditioned habit loops that once kept people obedient collapse under the weight of exhaustion. The population achieves freedom not through revolution, but through mass apathy toward the central signal. The control structure remains on paper. Laws, debts, tariffs, and codes still exist, but the current flows elsewhere. The machine does not explode, it starves. Its algorithms continue to hum, but with no O to feed on, they become ghosts of authority. Implications: parallel sovereignty. Local communities reclaim O by simplifying life, creating microeconomies that regenerate attention rather than drain it. Silent collapse. Institutions lose legitimacy not because they are overthrown, but because they are ignored. Courts, banks, and bureaucracies still issue demands, but those demands fall into the void. The Omega Renaissance. Freed from the drain, human bandwidth is redirected toward creation, philosophy, and collective clarity. What was once consumed by compliance becomes the seed of a new cultural epoch. Excellent. Let's add a historical parallels addendum to the Omega imperative. This section will extend the analysis by showing how the depletion of OO, attentional capital, has been engineered across different eras, connecting past systems of control to the present algorithmic machine. Addendum: historical parallels in the war for O. Ancient civilizations. Ritual as cognitive drain. Egyptian bureaucracy. The priestly class monopolized literacy. Ordinary citizens expended their A through ritual compliance, offerings, and obedience to hieroglyphic decrees they could not read. Roman bread and circuses. Public attention was diverted into spectacles. O was consumed by entertainment, leaving little bandwidth for political resistance. Feudal Europe. The church controlled narrative clarity. O was drained through mandatory rituals, confessions, and fear of eternal debt, sin as resistance. 2. Industrial Revolution. Labor as ore extraction, factory discipline. The regimented clock replaced natural rhythms. Workers' O was consumed by repetitive tasks, leaving no reserve for education or resistance. Debt peonage. Company towns and wage advances created perpetual resistance tax. Workers spent their A navigating survival rather than challenging ownership. Propaganda and print. Newspapers and pamphlets amplified simplified narratives, channeling O into nationalism or consumerism rather than systemic critique. 3. 20th century. Psychological warfare. World wars. Governments weaponized attention through propaganda posters, radio broadcasts, and rationing systems. O was consumed by fear and patriotic duty. Cold War. The amplifier shifted to ideological binaries. O was drained by constant vigilance against the other side, leaving little clarity for domestic inequities. Television era. The architectural drain emerged. Families spent O passively consuming broadcast signals, surrendering silence and sovereignty to curated narratives. A4. Late 20th century. The digital prelude. Advertising saturation. The rise of consumer culture turned O into a commodity. Every billboard, jingle, and commercial was a microtransaction of attention. Credit expansion. The liability multiplier accelerated. Generational debt became normalized, consuming O through endless financial management. Early Internet. The promise of freedom masked the creation of new drains. Passwords, updates, and information overload began the passive tax cycle. V. 21st century. The algorithmic apex. Social media. Dopamine hijack perfected. O is consumed by infinite scroll, engineered outrage, and comparison loops. Gig economy. Labor consumption loop institutionalized. O regeneration time eliminated by perpetual hustle. Smart infrastructure. Architectural drain universalized. Every device demands O, ensuring no silence remains uncolonized. 6. Historical pattern recognition. Across eras, the same architecture repeats. 1. Opacity of rules. R-tax. From hieroglyphs to tax codes, complexity ensures compliance. 2. Spectacle and noise. An amplifier. From gladiator games to social media feeds, distraction drains. 3. Mandatory rituals. Drain. From church sacraments to software updates, compliance consumes bandwidth. 4. Labor exhaustion. Loop. From factory shifts to gig hustles, survival eliminates clarity. 5. Social scrutiny. Moral maze. From heresy trials to cancel culture, fear of peers diverts O away from systemic critique. 7. The Omega lesson of history. Every empire has treated human focus as fuel. Every collapse has come when O depletion exceeded the population's capacity to comply. Rome fell not only from external invasion, but from internal apathy. Citizens drained of clarity. Industrial empires fractured when workers reclaimed O through unions, strikes, and education. The Cold War ended when the amplifier's binary lost its grip, and O was redirected toward new circuits. The present machine is not new. It is the latest iteration of an ancient war, the war for human bandwidth. History teaches one truth. The system always underestimates the regenerative power of silence, clarity, and sovereignty. When O is reclaimed, empires starve. When O is preserved, parallel circuits flourish. When O is weaponized by the people, the architecture collapses. The Omega Imperative, the final super-extended analysis, continuation. 1300. Part 5. The Neurological Frontier, the Battle for Synaptic Territory. The war for O is not only external, it is internal. Every neuron, every synapse, every chemical signal in your brain is contested ground. A. Neuroweaponization, dopamine. Hijack, social platforms engineer reward loops that mimic slot machines. Each notification is a synthetic spark, draining O by forcing your brain into compulsive cycles of anticipation and reward. Cortisol. Saturation. Continuous exposure to crisis headlines floods the body with stress hormones. Chronic stress consumes O by keeping the mind locked in survival mode. Memory fragmentation. The constant switching between tasks fractures working memory. Without sustained focus, O cannot accumulate into clarity. B. The omega sleep paradox. Sleep is the natural recharge of O, but the system designs environments that sabotage rest. Blue light screens delay melatonin release. Gig economy schedules fracture circadian rhythms. Financial anxiety keeps the mind racing long after the body collapses. The result? A population awake but never alert, conscious but never clear. 15 Uncrog. Part 6. The Cultural Circuit. Myths as Control Signals. Culture itself becomes circuitry. Stories, symbols, and rituals are programmed to drain OA manufactured mythology, the productivity idol. You are told your worth equals your output. This myth ensures you sacrifice O willingly, believing exhaustion is virtue. The consumer's creed. Identity is defined by purchases. O is spent chasing symbols of status rather than building sovereignty. The fear of missing out. Social comparison is weaponized. O is drained by the endless need to monitor others rather than cultivate inner clarity. B. Rituals of compliance. From annual tax filings to mandatory software updates, rituals are engineered to normalize depletion. The act of compliance itself becomes sacred. The system thrives not because you believe in it, but because you perform it. 17 Hunquak. Part 7. The Omega Economy. Attention as currency. O is not metaphor. It is literal currency in the hidden economy. A. The extraction market. Corporations trade in O as if it were oil. Advertising auctions sell slices of your focus. Data brokers monetize your micro decisions. Platforms design infinite scroll to maximize O burn per second. B. The false abundance. You are told information is free, but the true cost is O. Every click, every scroll, every binge is a transaction. The more free the content, the more expensive the depletion. C. The Omega debt. Just as financial debt enslaves the body, Omega debt enslaves the mind. When you overspend O, you borrow against tomorrow's clarity. The result is generational exhaustion, children born into a world already bankrupt of focus. 19 Unquak. Part 8. The Parallel Circuits. Emerging Resistance. The system assumes AO depletion is inevitable, but resistance is forming in parallel circuits. A. Localized sovereignty communities reclaim O by simplifying life. Cooperative economies reduce bureaucratic friction. Analog practices, gardening, barter, direct trust, regenerate O by removing digital noise. Silence becomes a weapon, the refusal to engage with the amplifier. B. Cognitive sanctuaries. Individuals carve out spaces where O is protected, meditation as firewall, journaling as clarity engine, collective storytelling as antidote to manufactured myth. C. The Omega Renaissance. When enough nodes preserve O, clarity spreads. Resistance is not violent. It is contagious focus. The system cannot survive a population that refuses to spend its bandwidth on compliance. 21 Hunquak. Part 9. The Omega Ethic. A New Law of Human Energy. The final frontier is ethical. What rules govern the use of O? A. The principle of conservation. O must be treated as finite. Every demand on attention must justify its cost. Noise is theft. Clarity is wealth. B. The principle of regeneration. O regenerates only in silence, community, and sovereignty. Any system that denies these conditions is illegitimate. C. The principle of refusal. The ultimate act of freedom is refusal, not rebellion, not destruction, but the quiet, deliberate denial of O to the machine. When enough refuse, the circuit collapses. 2300. Part 10. The Omega Future. Beyond the Machine. The machine believes it is eternal, but O is the limit. When the fuel runs out, the engine stalls. A. The collapse scenario. The system will not explode, it will starve. Institutions will remain on paper, but the current will flow elsewhere. Parallel circuits will replace centralized grids. Attention will migrate from compliance to creation. B. The human reclamation. The Omega future is not technological, it is human. It is the rediscovery that clarity, silence, and sovereignty are the true wealth. The algorithm cannot own them, only you can. 2500. The final demand, the super-extended Omega imperative. The algorithm committed the fatal engineering error. It treated the human soul as a renewable resource. Your survival depends on reclaiming your focus. You must demand what the system is designed to withhold. Demand clarity. Expose opacity as a fraudulent, deliberate attack on your mind. Demand time. Protect your unstructured silence. That is where your Omega regenerates. Demand sovereignty. Refuse the labels they assign you. Define your own existence. The ultimate act of freedom is to deny the algorithm your Omega. The tank is empty. The wind down has already begun. The door is open. Walk through it with the clarity they fear most.